Thank you very much. Thank you for everyone that got here so early. I just want to start with something simple, because for me, and I think it's more acute now, in a free country, there is one question that matters above all others, and that is who serves who. Does the government serve the people, or do the people serve the government? And that's it. For me, everything else flows from that. And for most of our history, for yours and mine, government was not really our supervisor. It wasn't our instructor. It was not there to correct your thinking or shape your behavior. It was there to do a job. And that job was to keep order, uphold the law, protect the country, and then get out of the way. And people understood that side of the bargain. They did not expect the state to run their lives. Nobody asked to be managed. We just wanted to be left alone, to work, to build, to raise families, and frankly, to take responsibility for ourselves. And that was the deal, and it worked. In fact, this month I was in America. Any Americans here? None. Okay. I was in America for the 250th anniversary, and everywhere I went, one word followed me: freedom. It wasn't prosperity, not safety, not fairness, but freedom. And it struck me that the founders of America meant something specific by it: freedom from the tyranny of the state. From power that taxes without consent, that rules without permission, and treats its citizens as subjects. And I could not help but contrast it with my own country, where speech is policed, votes are ignored, and the law-abiding citizen is treated as a resource to be managed and milked. And the country that the USA declared independence from has forgotten the lesson that built the nation on. It declared independence from a government like ours right now. And listen, no one ever announces the end of freedom. There's no headline. Freedom is not taken away in one clean sweep. It's worn away bit by bit. A new rule here, a new guideline there, a restriction described as temporary. Always well-intentioned and always for the greater good. And listen, you don't notice it at first, because each step on its own seems harmless enough. But over time, the tone changes. You start to hear a different kind of language. Suddenly, truths become misinformation, disinformation, harmful content. And what do they mean by that? What is harmful content? Opinions, inconvenient facts, anything the government of the day would rather you did not say and would rather your neighbor did not hear. This was never to protect us from falsehood. Censorship is not a safety measure, it is a control measure by a governing class that never has to answer for what it has done. The maintenance of power by people who know they could not survive an open argument. In fact, we had Sadiq Khan lobbying central government here to control when people posted about crime in London because he called it disinformation. And listen, a government that appoints itself as the referee of truth, in my opinion, is no longer the servant of the people. And control, for me, doesn't stop at speech. I mean, look at the economy, because that is where all of this stops being abstract and starts becoming practical. How a country organizes its economy tells you exactly how the country believes who it belongs to. And nothing is more acutely obvious than regulation. Regulation in my city and regulation in my country, because it's always presented as neutral, as if it simply sets the rules of the game. It does not. Every regulation carries a consequence. It makes it easier for someone and harder for someone else. The more rules you create, the more the system favors those who can navigate it. The big players. Meanwhile, the small business, the person trying to start something from nothing, is buried before they have even begun. Because regulation doesn't really just protect, it also selects. It decides who can enter the market, who can compete, who survives, and ultimately, who wins. And once that process begins, the market is no longer free, it's managed. And success is no longer determined purely by merit or whether people can actually give you what you want. It is decided by whether you can navigate the system, absorb the costs, and comply with layer upon layer of requirements. And the result is always the same. Power concentrates at the top. The bigger player get bigger because they can carry the burden and shape the rules, and those trying to break in especially in London, are squeezed out, not because they lack ability, but because they lack access. Because in a genuinely free market, the ordinary person with no special advantage can still get ahead. And that's what the free market really is. It's not a theory, it's a correlation you can trace across every developed economy. As regulation rises, growth falls. It's the most consistent relationship in modern economics, and our political class behaves as if it does not exist. And that matters because we have an incoming prime minister who says that the era of deregulation is over. Imagine that. And that matters because a free market is not just an economic system, it is a reflection of free people. It says something very simple, that individuals, not the state, should decide what succeeds, what fails, and what is valuable. And every time someone chooses to buy something, to back a business, to start a business, to support an idea, they are exercising freedom. Imagine that millions of individual choices made freely every day is what shapes an economy. It's what drives innovation. This is what rewards effort. It's what allows new ideas to break through, not government, but people. And when those decisions move away from the individual and into the hands of the state, as we've seen, you no longer have an economy driven by choice, as we see here. Think of net zero. You have one powered and directed by the government, where the government picks the winners and losers. And for me, the same is true of taxation. Taxation is not just about funding services. Because every pound taken from the individual is money that can no longer be saved, invested, or used to build something. It is often spent on priorities that people never voted for, to sustain a system that no longer favors the working man. And listen, of course, some taxation is necessary, but there comes a point, and I believe we are at that point, where people are no longer working to build their own lives. They are funding a state that keeps growing, and as it grows, it demands more of what we earn, working against the very people to sustain it. For me, freedom rests on an entirely different belief. It rests on the belief that people are capable, not perfect, not infallible, capable of making decisions about their own lives, being the arbiters of truth, of getting things wrong and putting them right again. And real freedom, of course, has sharp edges. It includes the freedom to offend, because a right to speak that lasts only until somebody objects is not really a right at all. But fundamentally, it includes the right to build, to take a risk, back your own judgment, to start something, and includes the freedom, for God's sake, to keep what you create. And that is what private property means. It's not a concession from the state. It's not reserved to be requisitioned whenever government needs to pay for its own failures. It is the wall between us and power, and every free society has stood behind it. And you take those freedoms away, and freedom's just a word. And government control, it always arrives with justification, doesn't it? Your safety, compassion, inclusion, progress, fine words, really words that none of us can argue with. And they can be used to justify almost anything, even the exact opposite of what voters want. Now apply that test to the issue that has defined British politics for a generation, immigration. For 30 years, the British people voted for less immigration. At every opportunity, every party promised it. Every government delivered the exact opposite. The numbers went from tens of thousands to hundreds of thousands to millions, and not one of those governments ever saw or received the public's consent for it. People watched their towns change around them without ever being asked. They watched their wages held down, housing lists grow, their services stretched, and felt in their own country that they had been moved to the back of the queue, deprioritized by the very government that was elected to serve them. And when they dared to complain, they were called bigots, racists. Their concerns were labeled divisive, and their instinct to protect their way of life was labeled as hate. And there it is, everything I have described in a single issue, a state that ignores your vote, takes your monies for priorities you never choose, and polices your speech when you dare to complain. Whatever that is, it is not a government that serves its people. And nowhere is the result more visible than in my own city. For too long, London has been carved up along ethnic and religious lines. Each group told this wonderful country has oppressed them. It's Islamophobic. It's systemically racist. They foster a hatred of a country that gave them everything. And now you see it, our politics has fractured in our city. Not along left and right, but along those same ethnic and religious lines. People who have no interest in even speaking the language or embracing the values of this great nation. How did we get here? 30 years of mass immigration with no integration policy, no English language requirement, no civic expectation. They built a city and a country of separate tribes and called it diversity. That is not diversity. That is control. Divide and conquer. Because a country and my city will never be held together by empty slogans about how diversity is our strength. It is held together by shared habits, shared loyalties, a common language of citizenship, and the feeling that however different our backgrounds may be, we belong to one public life, one nation, one city, and an immense pride in being the capital of the Great Britain. And that has been the great failures of London politics. The governing class talk endlessly about inclusion while themselves presiding over division. It denounces anyone who raises a concern as intolerant, even as it entrenches the very division that makes common life harder. And they are the ones who have fostered dependency on the state to keep communities politically captive. I grew up in Kilburn. I didn't come off the conveyor belt of the right schools and the right universities. I worked. And I'm the daughter of immigrants who chose Britain not for what it could give them for free, but what it allowed them to build themselves. They came because Britain stood for something. Stood for freedom, fairness, opportunity, and the rule of law applied to everyone equally. And when you grow up seeing what your country gave your family and how different my life could have been had they not come here, you never take it for granted. You fight for it. And I will never apologize for loving mine. I don't accept that patriotism is something to apologize for. I don't accept that wanting fairness in housing, order on the streets, and honesty about immigration makes anybody racist. So when they throw that word at me, let me be clear, it is not racist to love your country. It is not racist to defend your way of life. For me, it's simply called patriotism. And the people who believe it come from every community in Britain. So we come back to where we started, the simplest question, the one that decides everything. Who serves who? And now look at the pattern, because it is one pattern. They police your speech so you cannot object. They regulate your work. They tax your wages so you cannot build. They ignored your votes on immigration so you could not choose, and they divide your community so you cannot unite. Because division is not a failure of their policy, it is their policy. A divided people can be ruled one block at a time. That's why they carve up our cities, our country, and it is why the most patriotic left to us in this room, in London, in Britain, is simply to refuse to be divided. A nation is not a market to be managed or a population to be administered. It is a home. London is my home. And my home was built by ordinary people who worked, saved, obeyed the law, and asked only to be left in peace. And that city belongs to us. It doesn't belong to the officials, the regulators, the referees of truth. So when we ask who serves whom, we're not posing a question. I am declaring an intention. Free people are standing up and giving the old answer to the old question. The government serves the people, and the people bow to no one. We are governed by, and I'm sure you all can feel this, a political class that believes every problem can be solved by constraining the public a little further. And that's how freedom fades. Not with resistance, but with our agreement. With 1,000 small permissions we never quite remember granting. And I'll end on this. Us in this room, we didn't begin the erosion of our freedom. but I hope to hell we will be the ones that end it. Thank you.